Struggling with sexual addiction, seemingly my whole life. As I look back now, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, had an interaction with a family member, one of those you touch me, I'll touch you situations. Didn't think much of it, but as I look back, I think it really piqued my interest in sexual activity. A couple small things like that during my younger years. And then at 12 years old, very much aware of the opposite sex, very desirous of being with women and young ladies in any way, shape, or form. I found a book actually in a grocery store. Inside it was pure pornography. The gentleman that was in it and the women that were in it acted out, and just went on and on and on. In fact, unfortunately, here I am 58 years old, I can remember what was said, what happened in that book as if it was yesterday. One of the most difficult parts at that age was I had a wonderful dad who taught me a lot of things. We played ball together, we hunted together, we fished together. But he had an axiom, he had a teaching that he shared with me, and that was, you could do anything you wanted if you just tried really hard, if you gave it 100%, if you worked at it, if you gave it your all. And it sounds like a good idea when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, playing sports and trying to be the best, but it's a lie. You can't do everything you want if you just try hard enough. So for me, that was the kind of the beginning of a struggle with failure. Then when I didn't do something well, it wasn't that I didn't do something well, I didn't try hard enough. And that fear of failure seems to have driven me to this day. But after 13, 14 years old, every chance I had, I found pornography. Every chance I had to look at a woman or a young lady, I took the second, the third, the fourth look. Solo sex was a huge part of my life. Maybe not daily, but pretty close. And at 15 years old, had that first opportunity to physically be with a woman, and there was failure. I wasn't able to do it, which, if you can imagine my situation, fear of failure, where I'm at, it drives the shame higher and higher and higher. Became sexually active before I was out of high school and into my first year of college. College wasn't about education, or university wasn't about education. It was about bigger and more opportunities to be sexual. Spent those first 2 years being sexual or doing things as much as humanly possible. Eventually dropped out of school. And I can lay claim to the idea that a part of the reason I'm out of school is my focus had nothing to do with education. It was everything to do with sexuality, to be with women. It was, the one place I wasn't a failure at that time in my life was when I could be with a woman and end up, being sexual with her. In my teen years, one of the themes that rolls through over and over and over again, besides that fear of failure, is the desire to get that pat on the back. That desire to be told you're good, you're better, you're best. And when it wasn't there, then acting out, desiring intimacy with a person, which today I look back and I see it was false intimacy. It wasn't intimacy, it was getting close to get what I wanted. My selfishness, it just has the depth of that selfishness that, today we talk about narcissism, was huge at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. Ran for class offices in school, not so much to be a class officer, but to be seen. Just this huge desire to be in front of people, to get their acclaim, and all the while, just afraid of what would happen if I got there. Sabotaging efforts then once I had that position. That was a tough life in a sense, but at the same time, it's looking back that I see it as a tough life. When I was in it, it was enjoyable, it was fun. I was a class clown at times. I was the man that ran for, senior class president and had issues and problems, but the fact that I was up there trying, getting the applause was such a big deal. Again, as I look back at that first time at not seeing pornography, but actually reading pornography that first time, there was an instant, almost gratification. Here was something that I read, I was excited, there felt like there was risk, but there was also was like it drew me away from reality, you know, and the idea that the imprinting that happened, the things that happened in my brain, now as I look back, I can see what happened. I can understand what it was like for the risk of using to be almost like an amphetamine high, and then followed that with you know, that dopamine, the feeling of feeling good and mood stabilize, just everything about pornography at 13, 14, 15 years old was like medicating, you know, and I wouldn't have said I knew what the pain was. I had no idea at that point in time. I just knew that the pornography made me feel better. I was in control. And again, as I look back, that idea of control was a big deal. When I was finally with a woman and there had to be a relationship, it was much more difficult. There were now two people in a relationship, where with, you know, with pornography and solo sex, it was up to me. Turn it on, turn it off, do it when I wanted to. But also, it was exciting to me because it was secret. Nobody knew. I could walk down the street or into school or into a classroom, smile on my face. Nobody had any idea what was going on behind closed doors, or where my mind was going, or what I was looking at, the way I was seeing things. What made me feel good the first or the second time wasn't enough the third and the fourth time. So the behavior also became riskier. I needed newer and more exciting pornography. And again, that put me in situations and places where there was more risk, there were more problems. The potential of hurting other people now was very much in play. Instead of just being me and looking at pornography and engaging in you know, masturbation, now I'm bringing other people into the picture, other women, and using them, quite frankly. There wasn't a relationship. They were there to serve a purpose, for me to get high, in effect. When I first got married, I wanted to bond and be with that person, but I told my brain, I'd told that release of that chemical over and over and over again, you don't want to be close to that person, you just want sex. So when you then enter into a relationship where there's a real desire to be close, it doesn't happen. You know, I thought about that fear of intimacy, you know, what it means, where did it come from? I think part of it is when you get close to someone and you begin to experience an intimate relationship, even as a young person, and then one way, shape, or form you're hurt. You know, you feel maybe abandoned, or you, maybe in my case, you've worked really hard to do something, you failed, and you're criticized for it. That feeling of intimacy that you so much desired, and now you have it, and now it's broken. You know, there's a trust when intimacy exists. And when the trust's broken, there's pain. So as it happens to you maybe one time, two times, three times, four times, then you want to have intimacy, but you want intimacy you can control. You want intimacy where, in my case, it wasn't another person. You wanted intimacy where you had control. And with pornography, there was control of the intimate relationship. You know, you could turn the page over or off, put the magazine down. I would risk by trying to look at, you know, other people in various stages of undress or whatever, or just look at, you know, attractive women in such a manner that, again, today I look back and I can see how wrong it was, and how, quite frankly, again, how selfish it was. But it fed that, or it medicated that fear of failure, that I think in some ways it's a fear of abandonment too. You know, you wonder what's going to be said next. If you do this, is that going to happen? Or is it going to be something positive or negative? And you really want to control so that what happens next feels positive. As a 13-year-old going through puberty, I wasn't the fast person ripping through puberty. I was behind the curve, and didn't grow until maybe I was 15 years old, from 5 foot tall. And so there were a certain amount of insecurities about who I was, not liking myself. That feeling of being looked down on, of not maturing as fast as some of the others, again, it created a place for what I've now looked back and described as addiction, sexual addiction, that it created a place where, as a young teen, I really desired attention. I wanted to feel good about myself. I wanted to have, I wanted that feeling of being attractive, being able to, in my case, control a woman, to be with a woman. 16 turns to 17, 17 to 18, you begin to use women, not just abuse the pornography. You're actually in an abusive relationship with women when you meet them because they're objects. There is no real desire to have a relationship. It's to be sexual with them. It affects every part of your life. You know, parental relationships, school, education. Your desires become more important than everything else. But there was a process. It didn't just happen. You know, it began at 13, 14 and looking at that first, or reading that first pornography, then seeing pornography, then trying to be sexual and having a failure, then working really hard to overcome that failure, you know, and it just grows. As a young person, as a teen, you would never understand what it means to have a mirroring neuron, or a situation where what you're looking at, what you're seeing, particularly video, you know, it's almost like you're in the video. You're becoming a part of it. You're looking at it, but in your brain, it is like a mirror. You're not just looking at it. It's like you've stepped into the scene and you're a part of it. The imprinting of that particular activity, that as we say, you're employing the mirroring neurons. You're joining into activity. You're really not, but in your brain you are, and that increases the desire. And again, not just increases the desire, it increases the speed at which you desire to be with someone, or to be in that video, to be a part of it, and you absolutely have no clue. You do not understand at 14, 15, 16 what's going inside your brain. You have no idea that your brain's changing. You know, we talk about today that this is an escalative disease, or that it's an escalative problem, that what you have today is not enough tomorrow. And when you're thinking of that process, that mirroring, and actually moving into the scene or moving out of it, it also means the type of pornography, the things you're seeing, are going to grow. You know, what's, as I said, enough today may not be enough tomorrow. One of the hardest things to understand when you're 13, 14, 15 years old is, what's the future going to look like? You know, you're engaging in pornography. In my case, I thought I just needed more. I was oversexed, you know, in my mind. What I didn't realize, that I was also programming my brain. What was going into my brain through the images of pornography, particularly the pictures of women who in my situation were perfect. You know, I just thought they were beautiful, they were attractive. Certain parts of their body were more attractive than others to me. But this programming that's going on in my head is telling me that's what sex is going to look like, or that's what sex is going to be like someday when I'm with a woman that I have a relationship. In my case, that became a dream, per se, of what sexual activity would be like when I was married. You know, the marriage would be, you know, bells and whistles and explosions. Everything would be exciting, just as it was when I was looking at pornography. This is such a false picture that you have as a teen. There's no way in the world any person is going to be able to live up to, you know, video pornography, to what people do in a movie. No matter how real it may look, it's false. It's not really happening. Those people are under a camera. They're being told what to do. Scenes are starting and stopping to make them look real. People of one age are being dressed to look like another age. But again, you're programming your brain to believe this is what sex is. This is what sex is going to be like someday for me, you know, when I'm with that woman I love. And as a teenager, I never understood that I would take this to such a level that in my 20s, when I began to travel experienced more opportunities to be with women or to, at that point, video pornography was in hotel rooms. I traveled on business. I began to recognize this wasn't right. Something was wrong. And the way I would fix it, or the way it would get better, was to marry. And it was such a horrible idea. What seemed exciting and the picture of happiness and sexual intimacy at 13, 14, 15, 16, I was now expecting to happen at 26 and 27. It was impossible for any woman I married to live up to what I had seen. It was impossible for that person to be compliant, to do the things that I saw and that I expected. It was even impossible for that person to have a relationship with me outside of the bedroom, because my thoughts were that's where intimacy happened. There was no such thing as intimacy when you got up in the morning and you had breakfast together and you talked, or you enjoyed each other's company. Intimacy happened in the bedroom. But when you're 14, you're 15 years old, you're 6, you have no clue. No matter what I was looking at or doing, I had the ability to turn it off, turn it on, and control what was happening. I wanted that same thing in marriage. And it would be impossible for any woman to live up to my expectations. And my wife didn't live up to those expectations. And when she didn't, I blamed her. When I blamed her, I had the out to go ahead and say, well, I deserve this, I deserve that. So I went from a man engaging often in pornography and sexual activity outside of marriage to someone now doing it inside of marriage. The adulterous relationships I had, they eventually led to a divorce, you know. The really good news for me, or the good news that we might discuss here, is that at the age of 35, I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And for the first time in my life, I was willing, not totally, but willing to some degree, to give up, to let go, to allow somebody outside of me to guide me. In this case, it was, first attending church, hearing good news, hearing messages about love and relationship. The first church I ever attended, I remember the pastor coming to me on the first Sunday, and he said, I want you to do me a favor. And he knew my history, my background. We'd talked about it before. And he said, just come here into this church with a body of believers and let us love you. Let us care for you. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be anybody. You can relax and be a part of, a group of people. And as much as that sounded good and was attractive, I remember sitting in that pew that first day and thinking, well, I'm going to be a pastor. I'm going to be up front. I started thinking of things. I could say this, I could share that. And again, looking back, it was the same thing that I felt as a 13-year-old boy or a young man of 14, 15, 16. It hadn't left. The desire to do things, the things that we talked about, or I shared the way my brain was changing, the programming that was going on was alive and well at 35 years old. But now I had a partner in Christ, quite frankly, that I knew, even though I didn't know, that change was going to happen if I could let go. You want to be loved as much as humanly possible, but you don't want somebody to get close enough to love you because then they can hurt you. And you go as far as you can, as fast as you can, to stay away from a place where you can be hurt, even if that means hurting others. And it also, in the long term, harms me, because you don't grow, you don't get better, you don't move in a relationship and learn how to love. One of the really exciting parts of my life came when I accepted Christ at 35 years old. I didn't have to perform to be loved. I was loved. The change was coming, and it meant letting my guard down. As I became more trusting of the Lord, as I saw him of a father who loved me in such a manner that I could be comfortable in his presence, I didn't have to be afraid to get close because I might get hurt. I could get up and he could put his arms around me and love me. And I understand he was doing it no matter what I did. You know, I don't know, it was different, you know. At the same time, being loved like that opened a door to think I could have relationships like that with people. You know, that I could let my guard down. I could move closer to people and not be afraid of what might happen. Yet, as I say these words, I can tell you back then, I had no clue what was happening. You know, I didn't understand at all that God was working in me, that that Holy Spirit that had come to live in me was affecting change. You know, the more I trusted Him, the more willing I was to trust people. And I found out that people weren't all bad. They weren't all out there to hurt me. Most of the pain, or a fair share of the pain that I felt all the years from, you know, those teen years into now late 30s, was self-inflicted. It was a pain that was attached to fantasy. You know, as much as the fantasy medicated the pain was fantasy. It didn't exist. What was going on inside of me was taking a memory and rolling it over and over and over in my brain. No idea that that pain, that memory that I was imagining, was affecting everything I did that day. But again, the more I came to know the Lord, the more I became to trust Christ with my life, in a sense to let go, the more that memory was let go. And I know for sure that the closer I got to Christ, the less impact the memory had. You know, we call it imaginary, but it's there. It's the impact of it that changes.